the gut and the skin. So in particular, there are certain things that can affect the communication. One of the things is short-chain fatty acids, so butyrate. We do measure that on some of our profiles. And that's really helpful to know because that can really create, either a balanced microbiome where we have immune system that's working properly, which about 70%, I believe, is residing in the gut. And then that can communicate back to the skin where, if we have imbalances in the microbiome and we have inflammation going on in the gut, then that can affect the skin as well.
Hello and welcome back to the Vibrant Wellness Podcast. I'm Dr. Emmie, here with my co-host, Melissa Gentile. Today, we're overjoyed to welcome one of our own Vibrant team members, Dr. Donna Filatova. Dr. Donna is a doctor of clinical nutrition and a board-certified nutrition specialist. Dr. Donna's clinical and research focus is on digestive health, neuroendocrine immune health, natural hormone balancing, reproductive health and fertility, and cardiometabolic health. Thank you so much for joining us today, Donna.
Thank you, Dr. Emmie and Melissa. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited to chat about all things skin and gut.
Likewise.
Yeah.
All right. So we always like to kind of start with personal stories. So if you don't mind sharing, what was your personal experience like with acne, and is that what led you to studying nutrition?
Yes, actually it was. So in my mid to late 20s, I've never had this much acne, even going through puberty. There was some, indication that there was an issue, but late 20s, mid 20s, somewhere around that time frame, I've developed really severe cystic acne. It was not just on my face, it was on my back, it was on my neck, it transferred to the legs, it was the whole body. I was like a walking pimple. It was not pretty and it was very frustrating. So of course I ended up seeing a dermatologist because what else do you do in your 20s when you don't know better? So I saw a dermatologist. We were chatting, and of course I brought up the fact that, hey, maybe something that I'm eating has to do with what I'm seeing on my skin, which I was shortly dismissed. And I was told that no, nothing you're eating is affecting your skin. So I thought to myself, okay, you are a medical doctor, a lot of things, right, medically, but somehow that answer didn't settle with me. I didn't believe that that was the true answer. So I started looking into it. And at the time, it was really popular to eat a lot of dairy products because you get your protein from yogurt. And usually,
yeah, still, I see it all the time.
My fridge was like, I had a roommate at the time, and she even looked at my fridge and went, do we have like a dairy, dispensary here? It was like all yogurt and all these, fancy Greek yogurts and things. So I started looking more into it. And of course, I was prescribed antibiotic because doctors thought it was an infection, which probably it was, it was part of it. But looking back, now I realize that it was more than just a bacterial infection. It was other things that were contributing to this horrific acne. But antibiotic didn't do much. 2 days later, after starting antibiotic, I actually started feeling worse, GI-wise. And I called the doctor and I said, listen, I'm so bloated. I can't even, it's so painful. To which they said, oh, the medication you're on, doesn't really mix with dairy well if you're eating dairy. So anyway, it was the whole thing. And I threw away the antibiotic and then I started my journey on, okay, if I can't get answers from the medical community, I'm going to find it myself. And I did eventually, but it took a long journey because, of course, it wasn't just food that was contributing. So
I want to know, Donna, before we move on to the gut skin axis, that dairy dispensary, if that's the way you called it, I love that. Did you start to realize, was that impacting you? Everybody's different. So I want to throw that out there, but it can be, in general, a trigger for acne. Was that something that you, and it's interesting that the antibiotic actually combined with the dairy made things worse digestively for you, but from a skin standpoint, did you realize that the dairy was making things worse for you personally?
Yeah, I was in denial because I grew up in Latvia, Eastern Europe, where it's dairy galore. Everything is dairy, farmer's cheese made from scratch. I mean, we would make our own
Mm.
yogurt, kefir, or kefir. I think that's how we pronounce it.
I'm always wondering.
Uh, so it was made from scratch, where it was really fresh. Like you would go to the store and they will tell you, "Oh, it's already gone. It's not available," because they made a batch, and then that was it for the day. So I was eating a lot of dairy growing up, and there was never an issue until we moved to the States. And I think my mind was just kind of in denial, like, how could it be? I've been eating dairy my whole life. There was never an issue. I love it. I love
Mm.
cheese. I love cheese. But yes, I quickly realized that dairy was contributing. And over the years, so this whole episode was 14 years ago or so. It's been a while. But since then, I've tried, here's a little yogurt. Oh, let's try a little kefir. Oh,
Mm.
let's try a little cheese. And sometimes it's fine, and other times cystic acne, especially around the cycle, right? So with hormonal changes, of course, things change and the microbiome changes, and um, it's still unfortunately a thing. So for me personally, it does affect my skin. So I'm trying to not overdo it, or if at all.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that it's with certain kinds of dairy, like whether it's the quality, grass-fed versus conventional, raw, or pasteurized?
Yeah, certainly the quality matters. And, if we can get access to raw, which I know in some states it's illegal, which I think is ridiculous. But because, again, childhood experience, we would go and get milk. Basically, like the cow was there and the milk is right there with the with
Oh,
the
it's
cream and
wonderful.
everything. And so raw, unpasteurized. So definitely quality makes a difference. If it's fermented dairy, it's less likely to cause that. So I've been playing with kefir a little more lately. And if it's, without sugar, it's plain, it's full fat, then it's less likely to cause issues. But again, everybody's different. That's my
Mhm.
personal experience. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm in the same boat. It's been such a tough one for me to kind of cut out, but I'm the same way. If I have just a little bit, especially conventional dairy, I will see it on my skin.
Mhm.
But I do want to get into the gut brain axis. So, can you tell us about the gut brain axis and how these systems interact?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are multiple axes: gut brain, gut lung, gut vaginal, gut skin. So we are interconnected. And with the brain, so it stems from the vagal nerve that connects to multiple different organs and systems. And it's through neurotransmitter communication. Basically, it's bidirectional communication between the gut and the brain. And so a lot of times we do see that with inflammation that's going on in the gut can then affect the brain as well, if we have permeable blood-brain barriers. So I always like to think about the barriers, and that kind of communication. Is it happening properly, or something is broken in that link of communication? And then we have, as a result, maybe more pro-inflammatory cascades being utilized, and then we have an issue with the brain.
And specifically, Donna, the microbiome influence on skin. So we have been talking about acne, but also atopic derm, also known as eczema, rosacea. What's the
Mhm.
connection there? I mean, you talked about inflammation, but I'm also wondering about um, specific probiotics, and I want to get into that a little bit later. I'm jumping ahead here because I'm excited. But how does the microbiome influence skin conditions in particular?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I think of these organs, so the skin is the largest organ in the body. I think it's 25 meters squared, which is something like close to 300 square feet. And then the gut is 30 meters squared. So it's a pretty large organ. So first of all, realizing that that's our first interface, communication with the world, with the outside world and the external factors. And we can get into many different things that can affect it. Now, with the gut and the skin, so in particular, there are certain things that can affect the communication. One of the things is short chain fatty acids, so butyrate. We do measure that on some of our profiles, and that's really helpful to know, because that can really create either a balanced microbiome where we have immune system that's working properly, which about 70%, I believe, is residing in the gut. And then that can communicate back to the skin where, if we have imbalances in the microbiome and we have inflammation going on in the gut, then that can affect the skin as well.
I'm curious too. So we've been focusing on the skin symptoms, but what about GI complaints and patterns and symptoms? Do you see any kind of similarities between their GI complaints for acne patients? I mean, in terms of what they come in complaining of, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, generally, it's anything that will be potentially related to dysbiosis or maybe overgrowth of certain species that should be in check. So generally, we'll see things like constipation, diarrhea, so motility, fat, right? Digestion, absorption. Sometimes they'll tell you that the food is just sitting there and it's so uncomfortable and I can't digest it. Or we talked about motility. Now, bloating is something that's pretty common where you would see, with such things as overgrowth, like small intestinal bacterial
Right. I was
overgrowth,
just
or
going to say.
methane, right? So IMO or ISO with hydrogen sulfide or methane gas overproduction. And, generally we'll kind of notice that that's going to be more in patients who unfortunately suffer with acne or maybe these pro-inflammatory conditions such as rosacea. Sometimes it could be triggers from food. So the inputs, I always like to think about what are we inputting, because we're absorbing things, not just through our skin. We're inhaling things, we're absorbing it transdermally through skin. We also can absorb, of course, through the GI tract. And one of the first ways we interact with the environment is skin. And that's that barrier. If it's compromised, okay, things get through. We know there are a bunch of toxins and things that can, affect the health of our skin, and then as a result, the gut as well, because we're absorbing it. So that bidirectional communication, that's how we, communicate that something is wrong. Either the skin is communicating that to the gut, or the gut back to the skin, or whether it's the brain. When you have that visceral feeling about something, that's the brain telling the gut something is wrong. And a lot of our species also are helpers in synthesis of certain neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, GABA. So it makes sense that we sometimes don't feel good when things are off in the gut. So I think it happens at the same time where, this communication is going on. So I don't think it's just like gut to skin and then, let's talk to the brain next. It's just like always happening without us even noticing.
Right. It's all simultaneously occurring, and
Yes.
it's a complicated network.
And how can gut microbiome testing help uncover skin-related imbalances? What even specific markers are you looking at first?
Yeah, one of the first things, of course, because it is both our neuroendocrine and immune organs. So it's important to remember that we're looking at the whole system, because sometimes we concentrate, let's just concentrate on the gut, but hey, it's the whole system. So inflammation markers are the first thing. So if we're talking gut zoomer, for example, with the stool testing, we'll look at things like secretory IgA. I would love to look at that first, because that's the first layer, right? That's the first line of defense. This is our mucosal lining, that epithelial lining. And it's pretty sensitive to things that come from the outside. So it could be triggered by things like toxins, food particles. So if we're sensitive to something, there's so many tests that we offer that will look at the overall picture, which is great. Sometimes we do have profiles which like, 7 tests, I can look at everything. But specifically on the gut zoomer, we have calprotectin, so more of a neutrophil-derived inflammation. S100A12, that's another neutrophil-derived marker. We have EPX, eosinophil protein X. This is going to be more of the eosinophil response, so maybe true allergic response. We see this quite a bit with true allergies. So whether that's food or environmental, or maybe sometimes we pick up on mold, right? Mycotoxin exposure, and then maybe the patient is allergic to that. It's a possibility. So all of those are important. So inflammation section on the gut zoomer, first thing. Then, of course, we want to look at the commensal species. Sometimes some of them, and we always, on the clinical team, we kind of have a little fun when, somebody's asking about every particular species. And it's
a
like,
lot.
We still don't know so much about microbiome. All of them have jobs to do. One example would be Akkermansia. It's been like a rock star, in research. We know so much about it, but there are other species that can do the same job. So it's not just one particular species. Yes, we do know some information about some of the ones that may relate more to like oral microbiome. That's another one of the biomes that we want to really hone in on, because it's the first thing that happens when we eat food. Digestion begins in the mouth, right? With saliva, all the enzymes are being released, mostly amylase, of course, and then the biome in the oral cavity. That can really affect what's going on down the tube, if you will, with the GI tract, because we swallow that. And a lot of times we'll see, and Dr. Emmie, you can also probably attest to that, we see streptococci or streptococcus species. Sometimes those could be indirect clue that maybe something is going on, like a cavity or maybe caries or something going on with oral microbiome. We're so like this whole hygiene, concept. Let's use the mouthwash and let's kill all the germs. And it's like, okay, we can do actually damage when we remove healthy bacteria from the mouth, because then what happens is that whatever we swallow goes down the tube, and it could be these more pathogenic bacteria that can then affect the biome, microbiome.
Sure.
That's in the gut.
I'm curious, Donna, with the secretory IgA, oftentimes I see low secretory IgA in chronic states of stress and inflammation. Is that what you usually see, or do you see higher in let's just say acne patients, generally speaking?
Oh, in acne patients, that's a great question. I don't know if I know exactly the pattern there.
And I'm sure it depends.
Because we see both low and high. And sometimes we'll get like a batch of low CGA, and then there's going to be elevated. Like lately, this week was elevated CGA on all the tumors I've looked at, and previous 3 weeks was low. But when I see low secretory IgA, to me, that's potentially the immune response has been going on over and over and over, and we're fighting something, or we know there's a pathogen, or there's something else going on. And the immune system, so to speak, was busy. And now it goes, you know what? I'm going to take a vacation. Thank you so much. I'm going to take a break.
It's tired.
Sleep a little bit and take care of myself. So, modulation of that response we can achieve through different nutraceuticals, as of course we know. But I don't know. That's a great question, actually. If, acne is more of it would make sense to me either way.
Sure. And I think it would really, really just depend on other confounding factors too. If they had just had an exposure to a toxin, as you said, or a food sensitivity, or an infection, we might see it spike temporarily, despite maybe a background of usually low normal is what I would imagine. And we just don't see enough repeat. I wish we saw more repeats for stool testing. So that's something I think listeners tuning in should be aware of, that it's just a snapshot. And, if we can repeat testing, that can really give us more of an average baseline.
I do want to squeeze in one quick question. So when you do see low secretory IgA, are you addressing that first before you start to bring in antimicrobials that might help with kind of the gut dysbiosis? Like how are we supporting the immune system to get it out of that vacation mode, if you will?
There are things this is a great question. You guys have the best questions. So that makes sense to me to address that first, because that's that integrity of the barrier. So just like with the skin, we have skin barrier, there's gut integrity barrier. And this is how, it's almost like a gatekeeper. So certain things get through, larger molecules, pathogens and food particles in some cases are not supposed to get through. And that's why we call it intestinal permeability. I know some of us know it as leaky gut, but scientifically speaking, permeability. So to me, when it's lower, so something's going on with that mucosal lining turnover, or maybe mucosal lining is not on board to protect us. So now we can't really have that protective layer to, allow for nutrients get in, but then get the pathogens, not to enter the bloodstream, essentially access to the immune system. So that probably is one of the first things. And then modulating it, I think of immunoglobulins and, bovine colostrum. That's a go-to generally with clinicians. There are other things that, I've found in literature that are kind of not on board yet, but we can maybe tap into it a little more. I wanna do some more research before
Of
I
course.
share that. But
Yeah.
there might be something else in the works that is exciting
Yeah.
to support it.
The colostrum is one I've actually heard a lot. With that, sorry for all the same questions on it, but I have to. I keep thinking of different things as you're kind of explaining these. You mentioned earlier the issues that you have with dairy. So if you have somebody that does break out with dairy or doesn't do well with dairy, typically, do you still prescribe, or I shouldn't say prescribe? Do you still recommend experimenting with colostrum if they don't do well with dairy? Is the dose small enough, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so from the way I understand it, unless it's a true allergic response to dairy, generally these patients do okay with it because that modulation, it's not. So colostrum is that first liquid that we get when we have a baby, so human or animal, mammal. Um, I don't really know if the proteins in there will trigger that kind of response. I mean, of course, if somebody is super sensitive to it, once they take it, then we can take it out. But unless it's a true allergy, I think it's actually helpful. And I don't know if it's the lactoferrin part or there's other, proteins that are actually helpful for the immune system support. But there are certain things, like, for example, with children that are allergic to mother's milk, they can do camel milk. And I know that's not kind of like on our radar yet, but um, I've done some research there and it's actually closest to mother's milk and they're able to handle it. So it's just, I think we still are learning a lot and I think it's case by case. So if let's say we recommended that and the patient comes back and says, I absolutely cannot, I'm bloated, I'm gassy, I don't know, I'm breaking out. Okay, let's pull it and not do it. But I think in general, it's okay. Do you find that, Melissa, when you take it, it's making things worse?
I don't know. I felt fine taking it, but I just have hesitations, I guess, or just want to see kind of what you see clinically, if you see it more well tolerated, if it's kind of worth it for the benefit of it. Because I'm curious, like if it was flaring up somebody, but they have low secretory IgA, how else can we support their immune system?
Yeah, I think with dairy, it's also mixed. What I've found in research, it's mixed. So some studies you'll see that if it's full fat dairy, you're okay, go ahead. Others say no dairy at all. Then others say, hey, it's dose dependent and depends on how you are able to handle that. But for colostrum itself, I would think it's more of like immune supporting proteins there, not so much because the dairy, it's mostly going to be caseins and whey that are the pro-inflammatory for some of us. So
Right.
that might be how, but yeah.
I'm curious about any other labs, Donna. We talked about stool testing, but are you thinking about maybe cortisol, blood sugar, especially when it comes to acne? Those are things I think of. Hormones, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. First thing, if we think of that, I always like to think of it as a triangle. At the base will be metabolic function. So that's that insulin, sensitivity, glucose regulation, so blood sugar regulation. That's number one thing. Then we go HPA axis, right? Adrenal, so cortisol, DHEA. Do we have some kind of imbalances? And of course, stress is a huge part of this, right? So it wouldn't be unfair for me to say, oh, dairy caused all my problems. No, it was stress. It was other things. It was exposures and not sleeping for 2 years. Like it was so many other things. So, yeah, dairy contributed, but Yes. So adrenals, so metabolic, adrenals, thyroid, and then sex hormones, right? So we think of it as a triangle. And all of them play a role. And blood sugar regulation, so a lot of it will be, if we think through it, with insulin resistance, we do see more of that weight gain. We do see, but it also plays a role on the microbiome
Yes.
or the microbiota, right? So that the species that reside there can be affected and vice versa. So if we see more of that Firmicutes versus Bacteroidetes, if we look at the phyla, like big picture, Firmicutes have an ability to extract more energy or calories from the food. So we can end up gaining weight because of imbalances in the microbiome. So, shifting the diet can help, of course, more of that resistant starch. So we can help Bacteroidetes phylum to thrive a little bit better. And so things are more in balance. So it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and just as a little addition there, I think about sugar spiking androgens.
Oh my gosh.
So in our
Yeah.
PCOS patients who maybe already have too much testosterone, or even some women are just sensitive to normal levels of testosterone. That's something that I became aware of somewhat recently. I thought that was fascinating, just depending on our predisposition and
Yeah.
genetics, I'm sure. So that's another piece with the sugar and the
Oh, it is. Yeah, I didn't mention, you guys, that I buried the headline there. I was diagnosed with PCOS at that same time, and it was even like to the point of premature menopause. So
Wow.
hormones were so out of balance that these were the diagnoses that my GYN doctor at the time provided. So yes.
I like how you say that, because sometimes we need to question those.
Yes. But I don't, you know what I mean? Thinking back, of course, it's like, oh, did I really have that? Did I, they didn't really, I think they did ultrasound, but I don't know, questionable, but nevertheless, these were the what do we call them? Labels, right? That were assigned.
Sure.
Or stories. Yeah. Stories that we're told about ourselves. And we kind of have to, question them sometimes, like, oh, is this really what's going on? Yeah. So
And
thank you for sharing.
that actually is a huge part of whether or not we heal the stories we tell ourselves, right? I know you guys just had Justin on the podcast as well. So he's really trauma addressing your story you tell yourself. So
Huge.
it's a huge part of it. And it was, I would lie to you if I said that wasn't part of it. So.
Especially with skin, because it's something that we're looking at every single day too. I start to think about like the confidence aspect and the mindset aspect, and I can only imagine how you felt when you had your flare up 14 years ago and how it felt. We're so grateful that it triggered this new career pathway for you, though, because we're so happy to have your knowledge and to have you here with us now. But staying on the topic of skin and skin triggers, what are some of the most common dietary and lifestyle factors that can contribute to skin flare-ups? We talked about dairy, but what else are you thinking about?
Yeah, what else? And just to kind of piggyback on the fact that, the appearance can be something that induces stress. At the time, this was a side gig I did, but I was modeling at the time. And this was pre Photoshop and all the, AI things. And if you show up to the set and you're like, there's a pimple, we don't want to deal with it, because nobody wanted to do more work than they had to. It had to be clear and perfect.
It's expensive to do any kind of post-production, I guess, work, right?
Yeah, exactly. So nobody at that time, nobody, like photographers, they didn't want to deal with it. So it's like, if your skin is not clear, goodbye.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, luckily it wasn't my, full-time job or anything. It was just more for fun. I did runway and all that. But still, it affects how you feel about yourself, right? Especially in your 20s. Nowadays, it's like, do I really care that much? Probably not. Unless you're on HD camera like today. But anyway, the pro-inflammatories, so the foods. Dairy is one of them. So anything that could cause inflammation potentially. And everyone will be different. And I think it's more of a spectrum when I look at it, with patients, because some can respond poorly to a cup of yogurt. Some do okay with a tablespoon, and it's not an issue. There are other things, of course, the main monster that comes to mind, if we can call it that. But gluten, right?
Yeah.
So that's one. That's like first thing we're gonna think about: gluten, dairy, and it's not a monster, so to speak, for everybody. So it just again depends. Of course, if we're on this side of a spectrum where we have celiac disease, yes, please don't even inhale it. But some of us can handle it. What other things? Sugary things. So, Dr. Emmie, to your point of sugar dysregulation. So if we're consuming something with added sugar, I'm not talking berries and things you find in nature that might be beneficial, but sugary things, processed things that are highly heated and also fried. And if we use, for example, oils that are not meant for high smoke point, then that's probably something that can contribute to that oxidative stress and inflammation. And then we see, as a result, DNA damage and RNA damage and so forth, and it will show up on the skin. So those are probably the top things that come to mind as far as
I'm with you. Generally speaking, if we have no clue that the patient has no associated outbreaks with certain foods, or maybe they're not in tune with their body in that way, I always start sugar, dairy, gluten. And I just want to throw out there too that it can be really triggering to even advise a patient to take out one of those things. So I'm just super careful, about even, I like the crowding out method. If we don't want to restrict because it's too risky and we don't want to trigger stress or disordered eating in somebody,
yes,
I say, well, can we add, like you said, can we add kefir? Can we add, more fiber, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many great things. Can we add more protein? Can we talk about regularly timed meals? I think so many people are skipping meals and their blood sugar is all over the place. And
yes.
a lot
I
you can
love
do.
that because that's how we, I have mentees and that's how we mentor, because it's like, let's not think about what we need to take out, right? Let's concentrate on what can we add in. And as a result, they would just kind of gradually get away from the food that is not really beneficial. I love that because we do see, unfortunately, certain amount of disordered eating patterns triggered by this, like, oh, I can't do this, I can't. And then on top of it, we run sensitivity testing. And then, there's a bunch of foods that are, oh, I can't eat that. And then
it can be overwhelming.
Stress. Yeah. So I think I love that. I love that method. And like you said, it doesn't have to be a lot. It could be part of your salad dressing. Let's try a little kefir, or maybe nuts and seeds, just sprinkle it on the salad or your soup, or add it to your smoothie, whatever you want to do. But that's how I usually practice, is like, let's just add some stuff and not remove so much. But then they'll find that they're not going to be craving or even hungry for these foods that are usually energy and nutritionally null. There's no value as far as micronutrients go, like minerals and vitamins and foods that are generally going to be triggering. But yeah.
I want to segue, Donna, into some of the fun stuff. I say fun stuff. This is all fun stuff. But when I think about the actual topicals that we're using and the skincare, I mean, we've got so much here. I'm skipping around a little bit. But I want to know about topical pre and probiotics. I have a product. It's Osea, or I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
Yeah, I think I've heard of it.
I like their stuff, and they have a prebiotic in there and a non-viable probiotic. They have even a little asterisk that says this is non-viable. There's no live organisms. So I'm like, okay, so what's the benefit of putting this on my skin? Is there anything there that you can share with us?
Yeah, I love that they have that disclaimer, because a lot of products are mislabeled. Is that a right term?
Sure.
Where they say probiotic skincare, and it's like, there's no live organisms. So I'm sorry, if it doesn't need to be refrigerated, it's not live culture, right? So I think there's some benefit with prebiotics, because we do know the skin barrier requires these short chain fatty acids, and that's comes from prebiotics, and then probiotics, bacteria fermented into postbiotics or short chain fatty acids. So we can think of it internally, so by eating more fiber and resistant starch foods. And then I don't think there's any side effect of putting that on your skin, because it makes sense. We have epidermis, then the dermis is the next layer, and then of course we get into like subcutaneous layers. So there's physical barrier, That's going to be the outer, like epidermis. And then there's going to be mechanical barriers. So with all the chemicals and proteins and lipids.
Right.
So it makes sense to me because you're applying it on the skin, and that's where your skin which I should asterisk, skin microbiome. It's not just face, right? It's your back, it's your arms, it's everywhere. But it makes sense to me that you would feed your biome with these prebiotics.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's kind of a novel concept, but I love the way you frame that in terms of, well, we need the prebiotics to feed the probiotics to produce the postbiotics.
Yeah.
We have an ecosystem and a microbiome on the skin, so why not feed it?
Gosh. Yes, we do. And that makes so much sense. I will even go back to, my childhood where we would so we had yogurt. Either we made it ourselves, we had these grains from I don't know how many thousands of years ago, apparently. And we made our own. We would mix that with honey and sometimes add berries like strawberries or blueberries. You mush it up and then you just make a mess. So that's how I did that as a child. So there was probiotic and prebiotic, but these are life cultures from yogurt. So you can even do something in the kitchen and feed your skin that way. But
yes, beautiful. Oh gosh, that could be a whole nother episode. I'm always saying that, but do it yourself skincare, do it yourself probiotics, do it yourself fermented foods. I think we need at least a part 2. I don't want to miss out on hearing you speak to dog stuff. Doggy nutrition and doggy microbiomes and how this impacts us, Donna, because this is so exciting. So before we have to let you go, I'd love to know about this One Health concept that you brought to the table for this conversation. And can you explain how dogs and humans share microbiomes and what factors influence this exchange? It's definitely right up your alley. So
oh my gosh, yes, I love it. I just did a post. I thought I would get a lot of grief about it. But, my dogs are allowed on the furniture. They're in my face. It's, I know it's a no-no for a lot. I'm talking to dog people here, but yes. So One Health concept basically means how do we interact with the environment and the animals around us and vice versa. So whether it's the wild animals or pets that we have, in the home, there's interaction going on, and whatever they bring from their ecosystem from the outside world is gonna be affecting us. So it's not just gut microbiome, it's also your skin microbiome. So we touch them, they cuddle with us, so that whatever it is, it ends up on your skin. And microbiomes, so this is fascinating, and this is pretty new. I think fall of 2024. There's been a study to look at how do we share microbiomes. And they looked at the baseline, then 2 weeks after cohabiting with the dog, and then a month later and 3 months later. At the 1 month mark, there were about 48 species that were similar in our microbiome. Wow. So it's at the phyla level is more of like similarity, but then species are a little different, with dogs. But the fascinating thing is that anytime we have some kind of GI issue, with a dog. My vet knows us really well. You know what is recommended? Visbiome. It's the probiotic that we use for humans as well. So it's a really potent probiotic. There are others as well, but thank God we caught up, in the canine veterinary science that, we need probiotics and not so much flagell all the time. So that's one way, we kind of share it. Our genome, so the microbiome, is 63% similar to canines, to dogs. That's more than mice and pigs. So I think mice is 33%, and then pigs 20% similarity. So we're more similar as far as our microbiome genes go to canines, than other animals that we used to think were more similar to. So
that makes sense.
As a result, so this is what's fascinating. As a result, scientists are looking at canines now to study, certain conditions and microbiome. Obviously it's all humane and nobody's going to get hurt, but it's going to help us to understand more about human health, essentially, by utilizing canine companions. So that's the cool things. Even the gene therapy. So they went as far as like altering the genes for hemophilia.
Mm.
And that was all like learned from dogs. So it's really fascinating.
What would we do without dogs? I can't imagine a planet,
I
a
know, right?
world without dogs.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, they're the best.
Oh,
And we could talk about that all day long too.
all day. The skincare routines and dogs. Yeah, that's please.
We have to know, what is your personal skincare routine and what recommendations do you have? Is it looking at certain ingredients or reading labels, things to avoid, things you recommend? Give us all of it.
Yeah, kind of to simplify it, because my routine can get really very involved if I'm trying to just kind of make it my stress reduction, method. But just in general, just to simplify, it's a good cleanser. So mine is usually either oil-based or gel-based, depending on the season we're in and what the skin needs. Then I have serum. Sometimes I'll do the eye, serum as well. And then there's a good moisturizer like cream. And recently, so I'm very much into the what's called holistic skincare, which means it's not just what we put on our skin, it's what we eat, how we practice stress management. It's holistic, right? So it's the whole thing. Now, when we talk about clean skincare, I like to scan my items on the Yuka app.
Yeah, I've used that one too.
Yeah, usually it gives me a little bit of so I use something with hydroxytyrosol that's considered waterless skincare for most of my things. And then for my evening routine, I actually added something that Vibrant offers. So Regenerate serum that is personalized based on your genetics. And it's amazing because it's personalized to you. It's peptides. It's 25 plus or minus, depending on what the needs are. You have to take your picture. You send it for analysis by a dermatologist. You also fill out skin questionnaire, and also genetic component there. So they can take a look and see, are we more at risk for wrinkling, photo damage, right, from UV rays? What else? The elasticity of the skin. So they look at collagen production, oxidative stress. So are you genetically more prone to that? And then they personalize that serum to your needs. And what's even cooler, 4 weeks after I was out of my serum, it's face serum and eye serum. I was out of my face serum. They ask you again, fill out the questionnaire, submit pictures. So they want to see how your skin progresses, how are we improving? And then they make the next serum based on what you need, a month later. So I think it's so fascinating. I'm cheating on my regular skincare at night because that's the night item. But overall, I'm using what's called Waterless skincare. It's hydroxytyrosol, which is olive leaf extract based. That's the major ingredient in there, and it's clean and holistic and all the things. So that's sort of
Yeah. What was the brand on the water based?
Waterless. Yeah, it's Olivetta. And if you want, guys, I can link it for you.
I'm always curious, always looking for the next best, non-toxic options here also.
They're out of actually Germany, but their olive trees are grown in Spain. And every tree is like a child. It's numbered. They take care of it. It's pretty fascinating. They've been around for 20 years. I can't believe that. It's just
farm to skin.
Yeah.
It's like farm to table.
Yeah. Actually, they have internals too that you can drink. It's collagen and hydroxytyrosol. So you can ingest your skincare and you can put it on your skin. And
we need it all.
Yeah.
Love it.
Well, Donna, this episode has been just jam-packed with so many different things. I love that we were talking skincare, dogs, microbiome, all of it, all the different testing. And, thank you for sharing your personal story also. I think that just really helps you relate to people on kind of a different level when you've gone through the whole skincare journey yourself and had to go discover what was flaring up your own skin. So I hope our listeners today take a lot from your story and your expertise. And if anyone wants to connect with you and really liked this episode, where can we find you online?
Instagram, probably the best source. So it's just Dr. like Dr. Dr. Dana. I spell my name like Dana, and then Filatova. So it's at Dr. Dana Filatova on Insta.
And we'll link this down below for you guys that are tuning in. And until next week, wishing us all vibrant health and wellness. Thanks, Donna.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here today. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so we can continue to pay it forward together. And remember, the key to longevity is knowledge. Keep learning, growing, and tuning in to the Vibrant Wellness podcast to discover the latest insights and strategies for optimal health. Join us again next week. And just a reminder, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The views expressed by guests and hosts are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy of Vibrant Wellness. As always, consult your healthcare provider before applying any recommendations that you heard here today.